Okay, so we're going to have a look at the planned shelter side of things now. So if you're planning on staying out for the night, obviously you're going to need something to sleep in that's going to keep you dry. So in the form of a tent or a tarp. So you could use a tarp, which is basically just a waterproof sheet, and place it over the top. Use a walking pole to prop it up in the middle and have it as a nice A-frame. Benefits of this is it's super lightweight. You can use walking poles and then just take a few additional pegs to peg it down nice and tight. And it's a super quick, easy way of getting some shelter that's super lightweight. Downside of it is obviously that it's not covered over, so you've got no fly sheet to keep the bugs off you. There's openings either side, so if it's really windy, you're going to get battered by that wind and it's not going to be very sturdy. The other downside is obviously if it's windy and raining, then you're going to get driving rain coming in. So it's great for lightweight, but it's not the best in the mountains if it's really windy and wet. The times that I generally use this are when I'm out canoeing or mountain biking and I can stop near a wood block, and so like a wooded area, and I can stick my hammock up and have this over the top of my hammock and have my hammock underneath it. Then it gives me a good little admin space beneath it that's nice and dry, and I can get into my hammock and everything can be nice and basically held around me as a nice shelter. Keeps me nice and dry, and it's super lightweight and easy. So that's the tarp. So we'll talk about things that you need to consider when purchasing a tent, and I'll refer to my tents and how that's relevant to them and how that actually impacts which one I choose. So first of all, you need to understand where you're going to be using the tent. So what conditions you're going to be using it in, what's the temperature, what's the wind going to be like. All those things need to be factored in. So if I'm going out into the winter and it's super cold, super windy, snowing, really harsh conditions, I'm going to choose my North Face mountain tent. This is what they use on Everest Base Camp. It's really heavy, it's really big, so that's the downside of it. But when it's put up, it's absolutely bomb-proof. This thing could probably have a foot of snow on the top and it wouldn't even budge. It's so strong. I've had it out, like no word of a lie, in extremely high winds, up to 100 kilometers per hour, because I've tested it in a storm stupidly on the edge of Loch Nagar, and it didn't budge at all. It was absolutely incredible. But like I say, the downside is it's absolutely massive and heavy. So in the summer, going away with this, not ideal. I'm using this at the minute as a family tent because it's nice and big when we're out backpacking, but I'm certainly looking for something that's a lot smaller and lighter weight that I can take out in the summer, you know, with the wife and child, so that I'm not having to lug this massive thing around. But it's super strong. The design of it means that it's strong in all areas as well, so strong all the way around, and that's something that you really want to look for in the design of your tent. How many poles has it got? How strong will it be against the wind? All that sort of stuff. The other aspect of it is how much space has it got on the inside in terms of height and length and width and the things that it's got inside. So this tent has plenty of space on the inside for things like stowing stuff away in the pockets. It's also got loads of admin space in the porch, so I can cook in there, you know, and do all that sort of stuff without having to worry. I can get changed and it's not a problem. So that's that tent. However, obviously if it's not super windy, not horrendous, and it's in the summer and I'm wanting something that's lightweight, I'm going to go for either one of these tents. Now I've got the Zephyros one and I've got the MSR. Now obviously the lighter weight it is, the easier it is to carry, the easier it is to pack because it's going to be smaller. But the downside is they're usually a lot more flimsy, and sometimes they're a bit smaller as well in the design of the tent, so there's not a lot of space in there. So this one's quite narrow, it's really narrow, but it's very tall, so I can at least sit up in there. This one's a lot wider and tall, so I've got a lot more space, but obviously it's much bigger. So the size of the tent obviously matters for comfort when you're out and about, but also having to carry the bloody thing as well and pack it away. Now, one of the big considerations with a tent that you need to think about is how you erect the tent itself, and is the inner going to get soaking wet before you actually start. And what I mean by that is both the North Face mountain tent and this MSR tent require you to put the inner up with the poles attached to the inner to then attach the outer over the top. If it's pissing it down, it can be a real faff to try and keep the inner dry. You can do it by basically pegging down the outer over the top, but it's really difficult if everything flaps about and it's a bit of a nightmare. Whereas the Zephyros 1 is really useful because you can actually attach the inner to the outer beforehand, and then you can pull it all out in one and you push the poles through the outer. So even if it's pissing it down with rain, the inner isn't going to get soaking wet before you even get in there. And that's a real big benefit of one of these style tents. So absolutely mega beneficial. Obviously, we need to consider the size in terms of, is it a 1-person tent, 2-person, 3-person, 4-person? How big is it? How many people are going to be in there? We've spoken about weather and what conditions we're going to be using it in. Obviously, if it's super windy and super snowy, then having a really lightweight, flimsy tent probably isn't going to hold up very well. So you need something that's a little bit more robust. The way in which the tent is erected and the pole framework is going to dictate this pretty much in terms of how strong it's going to be against the wind. So my MSR has a single pole directly down the middle and it works as a sail. So anything, whenever there's wind from the side, it gets absolutely battered and it's not the best at all. My Zephyros 1 does have a pole through the center. However, the direction of the pole is different. So actually, side wind isn't too bad with the Zephyros 1. In Norway, in the Royal Marines, we used tunnel-shaped tents. Now, these were fantastic if the ends, if the gable end of the tent was directed to the wind. However, if the wind came side onto the tent, it wasn't the best and the poles started to bend. And in the old versions of the tent where the poles were really flimsy, we had a lot of poles snapping and it wasn't ideal. So wind driving on the side of a tunnel tent is usually not the best. So tunnel tents provide you with a lot of space inside, a lot of admin area. They are really good tents and really good designs and really good shapes, but you just need to consider how you actually pitch that tent in accordance to the direction of the wind, essentially. So that's a quick overview of tents. Obviously, I've not put them up and gone through them. That's something that I'm going to look to do in the future on the hill and actually put them up and go through them and talk about different considerations when setting up a wild camp. But that's a good quick overview of shelters in terms of tents and tarps and things to look out for.